And is it recording on gallery view? Oh, hang on. It says it's in speaker view. Oh, no, it's okay. Gallery view. Mine's in gallery view. Are you in gallery view?
Yeah. Well, you know what's weird is like, we're recording now, by the way, but when I like,
press stop?
hang on. All right. So hello, sister.
Hi.
This
Welcome
is
to our second episode.
Yes. The second episode of Roaring Truth with Love. And we've already been talking a bit. And once again, I was like, there's several things that I wish we had been recording for, but we can just sort of pick up with what we were speaking about. And we have a couple different topics that we wanted to try to cover today. One is the idea of the Faithkeeper. And the other topic is the concept of sisterhood and what all of that entails to our perspective. And there are a couple other tidbits as well that we may throw in if we have time. If not, we can always pass it over to the next 2 weeks. So on the topic of the Faithkeeper, I would love to ask you what being a Faithkeeper means to you. And I know that you were actually sent a post regarding what a Faithkeeper is with a beautiful image. And you were sent it by a sister who sees you as a Faithkeeper. And I completely see that in you as well. And I see it as, also interrelated to a level of, integration, embodiment, soul embodiment, but also corresponds with sort of being in between the maiden and the crone, going into the crone, a level of emotional maturity as well that allows for that. So what does it mean to you to be a Faithkeeper?
So beautiful, your explanation then. It was sent to me by Claudia in our sister circle, and I read it, and it did really resonate with me. And I love what you just said about the maiden, that point between the maiden and the crone, like that transition of moving into the wisdom. Because, for me, I'm not yet physically a crone. And the definition of the physical crone is a woman who has stopped menstruating. So obviously I'm not in that space physically, but I have found myself embodying for the last couple of years that wiseness, wisdom of the crone. And she knows that she's lived a lifetime of watching and seeing humanity play its games and humanity play out, and she knows that everything's going to be okay. That's the space that the crone holds, and she's just got this element of stillness and peace about her. And so when I think of a Faithkeeper, it is that ability to hold that space of beauty and of stillness, and allow everything to play out, knowing that we've totally got this. Humanity's got this. Gaia's got this. The galactics have got this. We know that love has won, because love is all there is. and what I also loved about what you just said then as well, which was another little turn of the cog for me, was that integration and embodiment. And what I said to you before was the term responsibility is being thrown around a lot right now. And in the context of, we are responsible for other people's health. How many times have you heard that? And the psychological operation that's being thrown at the population through the mass media about the need for us to be responsible for other people's health and the spell that people are under believing that is not true. You know, we control three things. We control our thoughts, our words, and our deeds. And so as a faith keeper, I am totally responsible for myself. And in order to be responsible for myself, I need to be integrated in my emotional processes. I need to embody everything that I've ever been through, everything that's ever come to me. You know, there's no longer room for resistance in my psyche, because in order for me to be a faith keeper, everything that I see, hear, touch, smell, know, receive comes in and is not filtered.
Right.
Because it comes into a place where it's accepted that it is, and then it's moved through in a way that allows it to flow, because it's a natural process of life.
Yes. Yes. And I'm seeing the correlation between that and, again, being in that space between maiden and crone, because that space is so much about self-belief, and self-belief is so correlated to embodiment and faith itself, and taking responsibility. And when we can take responsibility for ourselves and be accountable for our health, our actions, whatever we're being, whatever we're doing, whatever we're bringing, then we can hold the space for others to do the same.
Mm. And go to what you shared about the cross, you know, the symbol of the cross. And immediately I thought of Jesus. And, you know, Jesus was devoted to raising consciousness. Jesus was devoted to ascension, to helping humanity. He loved humanity, and he died on his cross. He
Right.
died taking full responsibility for his life. And
Right.
But he didn't die, and he knew that he wasn't dying. He was surrendering. You know, his arms are open wide, and he's surrendering to divine will to say, this is, you know, this is where it is for me right now. And he chose that. There was no more fighting. It was complete surrender. And, you know, did it happen? Who knows? Like, if you were to think of that whole story in a linear literal fashion, it doesn't make any sense. But symbolically, and especially the way you described it in relation to the cross, he took full responsibility for his life, and he knew that it was up to every single individual to do the same for themselves.
And I love the way that you said that he made the choice. It was a choice. It was a conscious choice. And again, that all relates to Faithkeeper, making that choice. We were discussing, before I started recording, we were discussing the Lenormand cross, which is an ancient religious symbol even before Christ, but of course it looks very similar. And we were discussing how, you know, there are many situations in life where we're working in the world, and we can feel that beautiful balance of giving and receiving. You know, you're working with someone, and all that you're giving, you're watching as they expand. You're learning more from them, because all of their expansion is a reflection of your own and helps your own expansion expand more. And it's such this beautiful synergy, this reciprocity that's happening when someone is willing and choosing to expand, choosing to gain awareness for, you know, their own wounds, their own blind spots, what it is that they have to heal so that they can become more integrated, you know, more deeply embodied, you know, who they truly are, right? Before the world comes in and sort of shuffles it all around. And so there's that scenario, but then there's a scenario which relates to what you described for Jesus and what he experienced. He had disciples, etc. But
Yes.
the other scenario is where you're working in spaces where there is not that self-accountability. You're not working with others who are also aware of, the seeking learning path, expanding with intention, healing with intention. And so because of their own wounds, that haven't been recognized, there isn't self-accountability, there isn't responsibility. And so being able to stay in that space as a faith keeper, understanding that, you are receiving through spirit, even if it doesn't appear in the matrix, like, you're actually receiving that reciprocity is taking place. It's still happening, and having faith that it's purposed, and that there's going to be something that comes out of it, even if it's just more expansion for yourself and deeper self-awareness, even if that's all that comes of it all. That's such a beautiful thing.
That's all that comes of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that ability to be able to recognize it, that it's the infinity loop. It's I'm giving, and in the process of me giving, I know that I'm receiving, but actually I need to receive before I can give. Because otherwise I just run out of energy, which I never do if I'm connected. And if I'm keeping the faith, I'm always connected.
Exactly.
I'm connecting to source, and I receive exactly what I need in that moment. I was talking to another sister the other day who lives in Victoria, and we just had a conversation because she was feeling a little bit frazzled. And she went out that day and had this realization that, she told me this beautiful story of being able to help a woman that she didn't even know, simply by, this woman was pregnant, heavily pregnant, wearing a mask, and was about to sort of collapse. And she went over and she just shared a few words of wisdom with this woman, and in giving her wisdom, was able to instantaneously receive the gratitude that the other woman was feeling for sharing with her. And that's what it's about. It's about giving with no expectations. There's so much projection because the polarities are so strong right now. And standing in this place of, I am here to receive divine will, and to just pass that out into the world, whatever it looks like. I have the ability to respond to each situation individually in a grounded sense with clarity, because I am receiving what I need for that space.
Yes. And honestly, I think that you just hit the nail on the head, because the process that you described it so beautifully. There's so much gratitude in the fact that you are in a space where you are able to give like that, because something happened to get you there, or many things happen to get you there, many catalysts, and so much gratitude for that awakening, or for those many awakenings, or whatever that brought you to that space where you're actually able to receive from spirit and give into whatever space you're called to give into.
Yeah.
And so that alone is a receipt. That alone, the fact that you're there at all, and that you're able to, that you've healed those wounds, there's so much receipt in that.
Yeah. So, that process, and there are a lot of us that are holding that space. But at the same time, we still find ourselves wavering in that, don't we? And that's because we're in this constant process of embodiment. And for me, I feel that we're being bombarded with so much light right now, and that's beautiful. But in order to do that, we need to be more and more grounded, and we need to breathe. We need the air. And so it's taking that time out honoring ourselves. It is in the space of honoring, as you and I were talking about before we came on today, but it's in the space of honoring myself that I have greater and greater trust for myself, which means that I can keep the faith because I'm connected and I know that everything is fine, which means that when I trust myself, of course I'm going to trust that everything else is going to be okay out there, because that's the vibration that I'm sending out into the world.
Yes. Yes. And that's the only space really that you can sincerely give from that place of your truth and that self-belief.
Yeah. And in getting to that place, you know, we've, for both of us in our own ways, like we've been, as we, I mean, Jesus on the cross is a perfect example, because Jesus had so many haters. Yeah. They weren't called haters back then. But, you know, he had so many haters because of what he gave. Like, his heart was so big, compassion. The story of Jesus, whether we believe it or not, it's a story of a compassionate man who gives unconditionally of himself. And so he had lots of haters that wanted to bring him down. And for us, for anyone who has been on this path of telling the truth, speaking the truth, roaring the truth, we've had things come at us, and those things come in the form of energy. They come in the form, well, I mean, it is always energy. Mm-hmm. And over the last few months, I've had more and more that have helped me to create that boundary for myself. And it's a sense of creating that boundary. And I was talking to someone yesterday, and I said, it's like, for a little while, we create this wall around us, and we create this wall that says, no one is getting in here. Like, I'm just here and I need to consolidate my energy, and no one's getting in here. And then when we feel strong enough, we step up onto the wall and we look out and we're like, okay. And then we might still need to go back in and to recuperate and to stand back in behind the wall. But at some point, when we've done that for long enough, it's like we stand on the wall and we just beam, and we're out there, and we know that I don't need to go back behind that wall anymore.
Yes.
And that's a process of constantly honoring myself by going back behind the wall and rejuvenating, regenerating, and then heading back out there. But
I love that. I love so much that you're speaking to that, because I've had a very similar experience where I will retreat behind the wall and won't even be, you know, on social media or whatever very much, maybe a little bit just to peek, you know, but just really retreat. And then when I'm ready to stand up at that wall and beam, that's where that roar comes from. And then I just roar. And then, okay, that was a really long, loud roar. I'm going to retreat a little bit. I'm going to fill my cup again so it can spill over, you know.
Yeah, because the louder we roar, the more that the monsters will come at us.
Right.
And so it's with each roar and then the retreat that we get stronger and stronger. Because when we roar, and that's the thing, and this is how we get hijacked, is when we roar and then a monster comes at us and we feel guilt and shame or fear, and we retreat back into that guilt, shame or fear, and it kind of holds on to us for a little while. And if we don't allow ourselves to clear that and move with it, then it gets a hold. And something that I've been talking a bit about lately with people is that they've been noticing that they've had stuff come in their dream state. And for James and I, this has been a huge one as well, because for years and years he had military dreams, and he still does every now and then, like, because it was such a huge part of his life for 17 years. And so he was, you know, they were very real for him in his dream state. But every time when he would describe what was going on to me, it was always related to this. It was always related to a wound. Like, the meaning of the dream would always come back to a wound that was being really rammed home for him in his dream state, because it hadn't fully been cleared yet.
Or even recognized.
Or even recognized, yeah. And I guess, you know, for James, that wasn't necessarily the case because he was aware of it, but there was still, but it was so deep within him. But you're right, you know, people have, yes, people have these dreams and they wake up just, you know, feeling guilty or feeling ashamed, and they're not knowing what to do with that. And they've got that feeling, and then they take it into their everyday life and interact. You know, a person might have been in their dream and they interact with that person from the wound that was created in the dream state.
Right.
And I know you've talked to me a little bit about this, but what's your insight in relation to all of that?
Okay.
Or your experience even?
Yeah. So first of all, I'm going to back it up a little bit, because I just want to highlight and emphasize what you were saying about, you know, when you go out into the world and you roar, monsters come, and that triggers fear and shame in us. But what's really happening is it's sort of triggering the old wounds, right? Yeah. So it's like the fear and the shame, you know, it's not that there aren't multi-layers of it that can be purged, but typically it's more of a memory, like a shadow memory that's held in the body, held in our nervous systems from those times when we spoke truth, you know, in our younger years, and we were pathologized, we were shamed. This happens to everyone, but especially for those of us that are here to be truth speakers. Before we knew we were true speakers, a lot of times, you know, we were schooled in those spaces where when we spoke truth to something, or when we did embody self-belief and self-trust and we led from that space, you know, there was a lot of gaslighting and straw manning and smear campaigns and all of that. I experienced it myself, and I see it in the majority of the women that I work with. Female clients. And so it's those wounds that many of us have been working over the years to identify, you know, process, integrate, boil off, so that now we're coming into this period of time, and we've you know, we've built those muscles, you know. We've built those muscles, and I always knew that it was purposed even before this whole clusterfuck started going down. And I say that from a place of Faithkeeper, because clusterfuck, but it's all purposed. It's everything is purposed, right? It's all going to take us somewhere that we need to go. But now I see even more deeply how all of that schooling was purposed. Because if I know personally, if I hadn't worked through those wounds and integrated what I've integrated, I would not be able to speak my truth now and roar the way that I'm roaring now. And so all of this relates to your question, because it's.
Well, can I step in there for a second?
Yeah, step in.
Because that's really that inner child wounding, isn't it? When I open my heart and I roar and I get that sense of you shouldn't be doing that, that's my little, you know, that's the little person inside me that doesn't feel quite like 100% safe that I'm stepping out beyond the wall just yet. And that wound is playing out hugely in society right now, and it is being manipulated hugely as well, which leads into you next. It's being weaponized essentially because people don't feel safe.
That's right. And these are all reflections of human experiences that have gone down, you know, long before this ever happened. I mean, you know, just sort of the nature of the world, and how even like our ideas of what love is even is really upside down, you know. Just as humans in general, you know, it's in us and we can access it, but because of the world and because of the programming and because of all the wounding, you know, we all sort of lose connection with what authentic love really is and how we really could embody that, right? But we're walking around wounded, so we're all in self-protection mode, and love gets all funkified, and I call it false love, and it's well-meaning. We think we're loving, but it's not. In a lot of ways, we're harming people and we're harming ourselves. But yeah, so those wounds, it all relates to that. But the inner child work is so important, so that, for example, when sort of the hidden forces of life, that type of interference comes in, like what you're talking about in dream time, and in the world when we're roaring, or through other people or however it comes in, and we have those reactions, those responses, those emotional responses that you're talking about, we can recognize, that's for myself, that's typically my teenager. That's like teenage me a lot of times. But, doing that inner child work as it comes up, and, just holding ourselves in that space too, and really giving ourselves compassion. Something that I like to do for myself is, like, quite literally in my mind, parent myself, like see myself as my own mother, and pick myself up if I'm really little, or, if I'm a teenager, hug myself and really parent myself the way that I do to my own children, and really see myself as the mother to myself. Yeah. But did you want to say something else? And then I'll go on to the dreams.
Yeah, no, and in relation to that, what I was just thinking when you were speaking then was, for me, it is like this word honor, and it's honoring myself, the parenting myself. And people say to me all the time, how do I show my children that it's okay for them to speak? Let them speak.
Right.
And for myself, let myself speak. There was a situation on the weekend where I found myself feeling really dishonored and disrespected. And so I walked away from the situation and let myself speak, said, okay, I got in the bath, I held myself in that warm space, and I said, why is it that you feel disrespected and dishonored? And let myself speak. And because it's when I let myself speak that I get more clarity, and then I can take responsibility and go, right, so this is how you were choosing to dishonor yourself. And maybe it's just through a thought process, but a thought process then leads into the emotional response, which leads into the physical as well. Mm-hmm. So it is always about letting myself speak. And when I let myself speak, I have so much more capacity to hear others speak as well. So I loved what you said about that.
I love what you just said now, and how when we allow ourselves to speak, we're creating space for our children to speak as well.
Yeah.
And it just reflects all the way back through the lineage as well. I feel like when I do it for myself, I'm creating a space for my mother to speak in spaces where she wasn't able to speak, and her mother to speak in spaces where she wasn't able to speak. And I feel that very powerfully, even though, it's already happened. It's creating this beautiful sort of etheric space for it all. Mm-hmm. And everything that you said about, just honoring yourself it's so very important, because when we do that, we can honor others, we can honor our children. And, recently I've been in situations as well where I've even seen children being bypassed, and sort of parentified even, young children. And it's just broken my heart, because I could see that, it was coming from the wounds of the parents, because they were emotionally disconnected, and sort of putting it on their child to help them stay comfortable. But, just this really unconscious shaming for the expression of emotion, right?
Yeah.
So there's just so much, there's so many layers of work to be done in that space. And it's every layer is so meaningful, and to be able to get to the place that you got to where you can walk away. And I know we talked about this before, but I'm reiterating because I feel that it's very meaningful for you to be able to say, I feel contracted here. I feel all restricted. I'm going to walk away, and I'm going to honor myself, and I'm going to take a bath, and I'm going to feel my feelings. Right. And then next time in that space, because you broke a pattern, you didn't stay in the space, you broke a pattern, then there may be a very different response.
Yeah, so true. Yeah. And what you just said about children being dishonored, no, I had a really great remembering of that when Abby, my eldest, was about 9, and she was having a difficult time at school, and it was a little bit exhausting because I felt my heart was breaking for her, because she'd come home every afternoon, and emotionally she was shocked, and she couldn't understand why people were so mean, and all of this kind of stuff. And I would sit with her, but then after a while I was feeling really quite uncomfortable with it, because I just wanted her to feel, I wanted her to feel better. And I found myself one day saying words that didn't feel quite true to me, and stopped in that moment and just went, I just need to reflect on this. And what I realized was that because of my discomfort with how she was feeling, because I didn't want her to be in pain.
Right.
I was trying to fast track her process so that she could just see that, she was going to be okay. And in that process, what I was doing was I was dishonoring her and her feelings. And it helped me to remember that, when James was hit by the bomb, Abby was 15 months old and woke up when he was hit. And I woke up, obviously her screaming woke me up, and I went in and I grabbed her, and, my mind is saying, just go and give her some Panadol to calm her down, or something like that. And instinctively I knew what she needs is just to be held right now. And that's what I did. And I just held her. And it was so uncomfortable for me, because I didn't know what was going on, and she couldn't speak. She couldn't articulate to me. All she was doing was screaming and crying, and my heart was breaking. But I had to sit in it in order to allow her to move through it. And, eventually after 40 minutes, she stopped crying. But that was the longest 40 minutes of my life, because I couldn't understand what was going on. But the gift that I gave both her, myself, and James was that I was able to be there fully with her at that point in time, which gave her permission to be there fully as well.
Yes.
And when we can do that for ourselves and just be present with ourselves, we've got so much capacity to be able to do it for others.
Yes. And then you're priming her to be able to continue to do it for herself as she gets older, instead of learning that, it's shameful to have emotions and repressing them, and, then developing dis-ease and, anxiety and depression and all of it.
Yeah.
But it's so interesting too, because as you were speaking, and, you were saying how, you initially you wanted to help her move from a space of pain into a space of comfort. And, and I was just reflecting on that and thinking how, a lot of times that is the reason. It's very well intentioned, right?
Exactly.
It's painful to see other people suffer, especially our children. And especially when we haven't learned to sit with our own suffering and hold ourselves. But bottom line, ultimately, a lot of times there are good intentions, right, that are coming through, even down to, when we're, grooming or programming our children to behave in a certain manner that is, acceptable within society. It's because of the pressures that the parent that we are feeling from society, right? And so all of this stuff works to disconnect us from ourselves, disconnect us from our children, and ultimately then our children become disconnected. And I read something recently, I don't even remember who it was, but I smiled because I've written similar in the past. And it was just something about like, wouldn't it be like, can you imagine what it would be like if like a child doesn't have to do all that work in 20 years or 30 years because they were parented in a way and supported in a way where they never became disconnected from self. Now, just being in this world, just being human, the traumas of being human, of being in the world, there's going to be, this is my perspective, there's going to be some disconnection. And you know, in a way, thank God for that, because isn't that also part of the human experience? I mean, you know, I never want to stop expanding or embodying. You know, I don't want to get to a point where I'm like, well, that's it, I'm all embodied, my soul's sitting here in my avatar feeling pretty, you know what I'm saying? Like that's sort of the point. You know, and that point is intermingled with so many other pursuits as well within the world. But yeah,
it is. It's a homecoming. It's a constant homecoming to this process. And you know, it's just, this is kind of off topic, but I was just, for some reason, I was thinking about the most recent Marvel Spider-Man movie this morning. Have you seen it? Called Homecoming.
I haven't seen it. Nope.
Yeah. And when you were just talking then, I was thinking the word homecoming came and I thought about it. And it's about, essentially, the movie is about this dude, I can't even remember what his name is, but he uses holographic projection to create catastrophe in the world. And Pete Parker and his offsider find one of the projectors and realize what's going on, and then go and destroy the holographic projection that this Mysterio, I think it's Mysterio or whatever, is creating. And it's brilliantly done. And, you know, essentially it's the children it's the kids who see through the illusion to be able to do something, to go and shift the perception of humanity. And the more, and that's, for me, the more that I give them the ability to be heard, and to feel everything that they're feeling now, the more that they are embodied as at this young age, which gives them the self-trust and the confidence to be able to move forward in the world if they choose.
Yes, I love that. And it's just so funny to me because the predictive programming that goes down in these, and all I'm thinking is, oh, sounds like Project Bluebeam. But like even more than that, it's like the truth in terms of the power that lies in the children when they're supported. I mean, no matter what, it's in them, but it's a lot easier for them if they're supported. I mean, it's pretty plain to see that this whole thing is a huge trauma installment program. You know? And I mean, you know, you got infants born in the hospital, and there's people with masks, you know, looking at, I mean, it's definitely a trauma installment program for these children, which is why you and I and other sisters are passionate about supporting other sisters to find different ways just to support their children, to keep them out of those installment programs as much as possible.
Exactly. And I think, you know, like, we laugh about it and people might go, why are you laughing about that? But we laugh about it because we have processed it, and we are, both you and I, and I'm speaking for you as well because I know that this is you too, but both you and I are like 100%, I know that my choices are in integrity, and I make my choices are in integrity, which means that I trust that humanity will do the same thing. And so I laugh at these things because it is humorous to me. You know, it's humorous that a person would choose something that doesn't feel right for them because they're told to do it. So that's why you'll find me laughing at lots of things. And, you know, that's why the Dalai Lama laughs at lots of things as well. And I'm not comparing myself to him by any means, but that's why he laughs at things, because he sees the truth in all things. And go back to what you said before, which will take us into the dream thing again. But it's the more disconnected we are from self, the more that we can be hijacked, and look at the confusion right now that's hijacking people, telling them 1 minute to do something and the next minute to do something else, and people are getting confused, but they're just jumping and being reactive to situations, and they're being hijacked. So I want to close off on that, what I asked you before about the dream state. What is it that you know about that particular, what's going on in our mind? What's happening there?
Right. So basically, for me, and this ties back to the wounds, any type of wound that we're either not aware of or we may have identified but we haven't fully processed, it becomes like a blind spot for these hidden forces of life to come in and essentially attempt, in not very creative ways, by the way, because you'll notice like patterns, attempts to, I think of it as hijacking your vibration. So a little background. Chris and I had an experience probably, I guess I want to say 3 years ago now, that lasted an entire summer that I'm so grateful for, because it really led to what I call an external awakening. I'm trying to distinguish an external awakening from an internal awakening, which is, where we're discovering self, healing self. This is more like understanding the matrix more. We already had an understanding for the matrix itself, but understanding sort of what's beyond the matrix, and, hyperdimensional interference. And Chris and I it was probably 3 or 4 months where every night we had these dreams, and we would even have shared dreams, like they'd be the same dream. And sort of were like say we'd both be on the same train, but then we'd jump off and he'd remember like squirting a wolf with oil. I'm giving like an actual literal example of a dream, or I'd remember like running up a hill and seeing him do that. Do you know what I mean? So it was very like intricate, and the way that they overlapped started getting us to thinking like, what is this? Like this is really strange. And then, you wake up in the middle of the night after a dream like this and just feel like this heavy energy in the room. And we really had no idea like what was going on at that point. We didn't know if it was like, the house was haunted or something initially, because we hadn't lived here that long. But we felt intuitively that it wasn't that. And then it turned into sort of more obvious interference, where I would actually have dreams of like sort of, demon looking figures coming closer and closer to me, or dreams where like I remember one specifically where Chris was driving in a car and I was sitting next to him in the passenger seat, and he had his hand on my chest and I was looking at him and he kept pressing really hard. And as I watched, he sort of like morphed and turned into like the Baphomet, I would say. Like that's sort of what he looked like. And a lot of dreams were like that, where it was sort of like, it was like the intention was to create dissonance between me and him. And it didn't work, it didn't work, because we were able to talk about it and work through it. And I mean, this is probably like, we could talk more about this in another show as well. But ultimately, the end result was this deeper awakening to this idea that, there are forces that would love to hijack our vibration so that we forget who we are, so that we don't come into what it is that we are capable of doing, that we are capable of taking the self-responsibility and the accountability and actually doing. and for me, it was really like, once I got out of the fear, and I mean, part of that was like, am I going crazy? Like, Chris, both of us, like, are we losing our minds? But we knew that it wasn't that, but it was a very long process, and it was a very challenging process, where we definitely progressively believed in ourselves more and more, and learned to believe that what we were experiencing was real, and sent us on a path of seeking, where we started reading, the work of spiritual teachers that talk about these concepts, and understood deeply that if it wasn't for sort of this initiation, then we wouldn't really understand what it all is that we're dealing with here, and how the energies can even come in through other people. It's sort of like Mr. Smith in the Matrix, when we're wounded, when we have a lot of holes, when we haven't processed trauma, a lot of times, we create spaces in ourselves for forces to move through us. And I'm not saying I'm exempt, I mean, there's probably been many times where, especially when I was less aware than I am now, where those forces have used me as well. So
yeah, gosh, so much of what you're saying resonates with me, because for me, whilst I haven't had that experience in the dream state, but if I think of relationship, and I reckon that there's like a whole show that we can do on this, but if I think of relationship, those forces have come, those experiences have come to us in the physical world, between James and I particularly, and at different stages over the last 20 years, I can see where that has happened. And the most recent one, which I was sharing with you before, has been this last 3 months for us. We have together, we have stepped up in our relationship. We're connected now to a degree that we, when we first came together and we felt that connection so many years ago, we feel like that's back, but it's, on steroids after this last transformation. And that came because of what you're talking about, this hijacking. And the key, I reckon, of what you said was we can talk about it. We can talk about it with, we can talk, expressing my guilt, expressing my shame, and knowing that I'm not going to be judged by the other person, like being completely open and transparent and honest, and knowing that that other person is just going to, not all the time. Sometimes we bring our own stuff to the party, but knowing that person is going to sit there and just hold space for me so that I can heal. And whether that's everything that you just shared, it's the same thing, whether it's in the physical world, whether it's in the dream state, we're always asking, what is it within me that needs to be healed? That's responsibility, because when I heal this thing, then it can't affect me anymore. It can't get through, because it's using my woundedness and my weakness to get to me, so that I believe that I'm vulnerable.
Exactly. And that was really, in the beginning, when I said I have so much gratitude for it, that's exactly why. Because you can turn it around on itself, and you can say, oh, wow. So all, whatever my blind spots are, whatever wounds that I'm not even aware of, are being highlighted right now. And it's an opportunity to actually take responsibility to do that work. But like I said before, the creativity is lacking. So a lot of times sort of the same techniques will come in, the same sort of attempt to get at the old wounds. And it's sort of it's sort of humorous, because it's like, we've been there, done that, nice try. But
which is what happens in the physical too, isn't it? Like those loops that we suddenly see playing out, of like, that's the same thing that was happening, a year ago or a month ago. Or
right. Yes. So true, sister. And like when we say that, like, this is a spiritual battle, like, we mean it. And I know I want to speak to the fact that I understand that's really challenging for some to understand who haven't had experiences with the unseen. Because I certainly would have been challenged prior to my experiences with the unseen, or I would have sort of listened and thought, oh, that's interesting, you know, but until you're like really initiated in that space, it's hard to fully comprehend the realness of it without the incredulity too. It's just sort of like, yeah, dude, that's the omniverse, you know, like, you know, so I do want to speak to that. And I've noticed too that, you know, I have friends that I've known for a really long time that have always identified as Christian, and they have an understanding of this as well. So it's interesting to me that sort of what I perceive is like the atheism of the world, the disconnection from spirituality. I mean, atheism is more equated to religion. So I'm talking in terms of spirituality as a whole, sort of the disconnection from that, you know, feeds into this ability to sense, you know, all that's happening and to understand the different, you know, there's a matrix level, but there's another layer on top of it as well.
Yeah. And there's people that only want to stay within that matrix, and they don't want to challenge their belief or their perspective in this lifetime, and that's cool. I totally get the frustration that, because I've had it myself, of it's like, how much has to happen for you to choose to see beyond this, and realize how powerful we truly are, which is why, you know, all this is happening. But and I totally get that. But at the same time, I honor my choices, which means that I honor the choices of everyone else, and I respect their choices, and I know that I control my thoughts, my words, and my deeds. And so that's, the more that I connect to source, the more that I connect to spirit, I am powerful, and I am humanity. And this is what I said to James on the weekend, you know, when we had like the final level of this shift for us. I said to him, what I accept for myself, I accept for humanity. What I consent to for myself, I consent to for humanity. You know, when I look at things like that, every single action that I take for myself is taken for the good of the whole. And some people would think that they believe the complete opposite to what I believe. But the difference is that I won't argue with them, because I'm not going to try and make them wrong for having the belief. Right. The difference for me is a knowing, and the knowing comes from that spiritual connection. And that's the spiritual battle, isn't it? Like, the spiritual battle happens below the knowing level. Once we get to the knowing, and we're no longer trusting, we're just knowing, because we're faith keepers. Once we get to that, there's no, you know, we're beyond the battle.
Right.
Because we know the war is done.
We're beyond what we believe. It's not about what you believe anymore, because everybody believes a billion different things. Yeah. And absolutely, you know, I agree with you. I have absolutely no desire to fight or to change anyone's mind. I honor and respect everyone's choice. And what it comes down to is believing in myself, and understanding that it is that faith, it is that knowing, and faith in myself and knowing in myself. Actually, let me change that. Instead of I believe in myself, how about I know in myself? I have faith in myself. That I can bring in that faith. And, you know, it's interesting too. I wanted to sort of tie in with you a little bit, or ask you about your perspectives on some of the spiritual bypassing that may be playing a role in sort of limiting our ability to tap into the Faithkeeper. And what I mean by that is, I definitely went through a process myself where, the spiritual idea of, law of attraction, was something that, I didn't completely understand, because I feel like it's sort of been hijacked. And, the law of attraction, what it really means, it's not like, the universe is a slot machine and, I want this and you're going to get it. What the law of attraction means is that you are going to attract whatever it is that you need to benefit you, to expand, for your soul to expand, for you to grow, whatever it is in your life. And for me, that's tied into being a faith keeper, because I feel that for the collective as well, like in terms of how law of attraction affects the collective, like the collective, we are calling in, and the matrix is calling in whatever it is right now that we need to wake up, to expand, whatever that is. And and maybe you want to speak on this.
Sometimes we go, oh my God, why do we need to call all this in?
Yeah. It's, the only way out is through. And sometimes it's really not comfortable, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
I wanted to speak to that because, especially working, and I know you do as well, but working with so many who, have history of abuse, history of, we'll leave it at that. Deep histories of abuse, suffering. I know that can be a trigger, the way that the law of attraction has sort of been twisted within the spiritual community. So I just wanted to speak to that. Like, Faithkeeper is also, for me, it's about like, also, it's like embodying the faith, but also recognizing and accepting the dark, and like not bypassing the dark, and not, looking the other way. It's like accepting it, seeing it. I mean, I don't necessarily have to accept like, what's all going down, but the faith comes in because I understand that it's all purposed. It has a purpose that I can't fully intuit, but that it's going where it needs to go.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? I'm trying to bring it up.
It's like when you were talking, the yin yang symbol just came to me.
Right.
It's the whole, but the light exists within the darkness, and the darkness exists within the light. And in order to embrace the whole, we're embracing all of it. When we're not just letting in the light, right. We're letting in the darkness as well, because we actually know that, from the work that I've done over the last 7 years, it is embracing the darkness, like holding that darkness, and just, because the darkness comes from that angry teenager, right? Yes. And when I embrace her and just like hold her, even though she's screaming at me and like fighting me and wanting to kill me, when I just hold her and love her and mother her, she feels heard and she feels loved, and she no longer has control over me, because her shame is fully seen. It's fully in the light. And so she's able to flow so much more freely. And I put my hand up and say that I was guilty for some time of not wanting to see my own darkness. There was an element of denial in me, because I had this need to think positive and be positive.
Right. And
so I wouldn't necessarily accept some of the traumas that I'd experienced in my life. I'd kind of made them okay, and so many of us do this because we're like, oh well, this was going on for the other person, and so that created, and I'm in a better situation now. So but what happens is that emotional trauma is still there, and it's still driving me. It's still my rudder. And if I don't express, it comes back to honoring myself. If I don't honor the way that I felt in that situation, I bring that into every single moment that I have. The moment that I honor myself and say, I hated that person for what they did to me and I felt angry, I felt hurt, I felt betrayed, abandoned, whatever. The moment I speak that, it's in the past.
Yes.
Gone.
Yes. It's, you know, the saying, I think it's Brene Brown, we heal when we feel heard, but the most important person that needs to hear us is us.
Yes.
Ourselves. And then the shame can start to dissipate.
Exactly.
That toxic shame that keeps us spinning and keeps us in those past stories and bringing it into all of our nows.
Yeah. And that's the real light, you know, because the light can't permeate everything when you've got these little knots of complete contracted darkness sitting in there. It can't get in. But if you allow that to just open the door just by honoring it and feeling it in a minute, you know, and that the practice of Vipassana meditation is a beautiful practice because it says that essentially you sit with the pain and you breathe into the pain and you allow the pain to be there. Yeah. And the more that you allow yourself to do that, what happens? The pain dissipates.
It really does. It's like you go into the tunnel of it and it just starts dissipating.
But the more you fight it, what you resist is this, right?
Yes.
So the more you fight it, the bigger it gets, and it stays there until it says, right, until you stop running, I'm going to stay here.
Yes, exactly.
Right over you.
And I feel like this is such a gorgeous reflection of everything happening in the world right now too, right? Mm-hmm. Because the shadow's being revealed. And I mean, some of the most beautiful, fiercest roars of truth are roaring some of the most horrendous, grotesque human behaviors. Like right now I'm thinking of child trafficking and sexual abuse, you know, and it's like those are faith keepers. We are faith keepers because we are roaring this to shine light on it because we believe we know that we can heal this and that we can create a world that reflects love and higher consciousness and less pathology. And
we know that because we have done it already within ourselves.
Right. Right.
So we've already done it. It's already done.
It's already done.
Which means that we're holding it for it's like the aspect of the, you know, those spirits, those whatever they are that talk to us, that are helping us, the galactics, they're us in a different dimension.
Right. Yes.
They've seen it already. They've done it, and that's what we're doing. We're just here in this 3D world, just holding it and going, look, I've created this beauty in my life and I've healed, and therefore I know that it's possible, which means that I'm just going to stand here and hold it for you as well.
It's already written.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think, you know, and the beautiful thing is that's how you and I came together, because just through sharing stories and the resonance that we had, realizing that we both have these beautiful lives and we resonate with each other, and that was which is happening so much now, is like this tribal soul family that's coming together, and that's the sisterhood aspect, and the true sisterhood that comes together when we are healed is this. I've got goosebumps as I'm thinking about it, because there's no shame, there's no guilt, there's no competition, there's nothing that feels dark in there at all. It's like there's no energetic need for anything except to be and to support. Yes. And to receive.
Yes. That was a gorgeous segue, by the way.
It went well, didn't it?
It was awesome. And so organic too, which is why it was so gorgeous. but yeah, like, so, and that brings us back to the distinction that we were making before
Yeah.
between where you're giving and receiving in balance in some spaces. Um, that's what we're experiencing within these sisterhood tribes. There's this gorgeous synergy of giving and receiving, and it's because of this gorgeous, sincere, commitment to the work up until this point. And so we're able to, like, we trust ourselves, and we're able to hold that space for each other. Like, it's so pellucid, I think is the word I'm thinking of. Like, that's how I've experienced it. Like, it's very just pure and loving. And it's like, sort of everything that, like, within our sister circle group, it's everything that I've, like, imagined it could be for years, so it's, I mean, of course we're all, I'm in the North Node, you're in the South Node, many sisters are in the North Node, many are in the South. We're on Zoom in our circle, but the energy is so palpable, and we feel each other's hands in our hands during and in between circles all the time. We're so connected and so together.
Which is even more powerful if you go back to what we were just talking about a minute ago, and that the beings that are speaking to us being us is because when we come together in that pure sisterhood, we are actually tapping into more of that, and the soul family that is so huge has an ability in that moment to speak through us as well, and influence our circle, which influences humanity. And there's so many there are so many little things happening like that around the world, which is so beautiful. We're just one small little circle, but we're not small.
Right. Yeah, there are so many pockets.
Yeah,
I think you and Todd even were talking about that in the podcast, and it was like, yes, I mean, that's so true. There's so many pockets of us coming together, and we're all connected. It's sort of like this, I don't know, like I think of like a bee's nest, with like all the octagons that are like different cells, but they're all touching,
Yeah.
So.
Flower of life, even.
Yes, the flower of life. Yeah.
And
it's like something that I'm feeling so powerfully too is this beautiful ability for sisters to believe in themselves enough to be themselves and to bring themselves and to speak their truth, which then exudes into B, which is the ability for other sisters to be exactly who they are and to bring themselves. And I just appreciate that. And I have so much gratitude for being a part of that, because, again, like I was saying before, sort of when you're out and about in the world, in the matrix, sometimes that's, a little more challenging to have that giving and receiving of that, if everyone isn't conscious to their wounds and working on their wounds and their triggers.
Absolutely. And for me, I believe that, and I'm sure that there's other women in the circle like this, but I believe that being in that supported space and that pure space, it's helped me to call in more of my spirit from different lifetimes as well. Yes. And it's, there's remembering in reflections of all of these other women, there's rememberings of me in who I once was, in a different lifetime, in a different civilization, different dimension, whatever. And it's, and my mind sometimes wants to go, oh, that's not true. But there's this resonance that is created, and I know it's true. And that pure space of being in circle with women has helped my knowing even more strongly. And there's so much gratitude that I feel for that, because in other, when I've been, if I think of my my old life when I was in the army, and I had beautiful women supporting me around me, and it was a supporting relationship, but it was a very 3D relationship. It was very in this world, of this world. We're here for each other, but there wasn't much beyond that. and then being now in this space where everything is just, it's, you know, it's virtual, but it's real.
It's real.
And like you said, we hold hands and we can feel each other's hands on either side of us. Like that is woo woo, as Rhonda would say, but it's real. It's so real.
Right. Yeah. And to add to what you say, I feel that reflection happening even within this lifetime, because I know, you know, we span, I think the youngest is maybe like 30, oldest is 75. So, you know, we span some years there, and it's so beautiful. Like sometimes, you know, certain sisters will speak, and I can feel them coming from a space of what I might be feeling in 20 years as them.
Yeah.
And that helps. It's like this quantum effect where it helps to heal me in the now, where I have the roots, the seeds of that pain. And it's like, I won't even have to take it with me to there, because what they're expressing is healing that in me now. And I feel it going the other way as well, where, you know, they could look at some women who are, you know, biologically younger and sort of do the same thing, because they're receiving acceptance and forgiveness and understanding from, you know, younger women who may represent, you know, their children even in some way, even though we don't have that going on. Like, it's kind of weird to say that because it's so horizontal, like where it's so much about a sisterhood, and age is like not even felt in that space. But I'm talking like on a quantum effect, you know, a quantum level. That's just what it feels like.
Yeah, and absolutely, because when you said that, I remembered when Abby, my eldest, turned 10, I was sitting there one day and I was just watching her and her dad interact. And in that moment, I had this feeling just wash over me. And I went, I'm actually changing. I'm watching my DNA change as I'm watching these two, because I'm watching my daughter and her relationship with her father, and I'm changing my relationship with my father throughout that process.
Yes, sure.
And yeah, and so, you know, it feels when we allow ourselves to just be present in that space 100%, and we receive everything, all input that's coming from those other women, which we shift our DNA, we shift the future, we shift the past, we shift the now, and everything. We like literally create those movements of reality.
Yeah. And, you know, I'm feeling also how we can bring that into more local spaces as well, because it's going to be needed, you know, as we move forward. And it's like a beautiful place to sort of experience the energy of it and like what it truly feels like. Because I feel like I can use that as like a model to sort of bring with me as I walk through the world and connect with sisters that are, you know, within my 50 foot or at least 50 kilometer or whatever radius, you know?
Yeah.
Wow.
And that again, it goes back to, you know, how am I interacting in the world? Every time I walk down the street, I make a point of like looking each person in the eye and smiling at them. Some of them will smile back, some of them are like, and, you know, and everywhere in between. And go back to what I said about, you know, the sister earlier who just interacted with that pregnant woman who was wearing a mask. And, you know, that was a perfect example of, we don't have to be sitting in circle together, and we don't have to be, you know, doing the rituals. All we need to do is access the ritual in the moment, the knowing, and then gift that to the world, and everything changes.
And isn't that really what sisterhood is? It's like if everyone is intuiting and giving what they feel a sister needing, then every sister is given what they need. And of course, until we know to do that, how to do that for ourselves, it's very difficult to access that, but it's so possible. It is so possible. And even especially like, you know, the fact that that particular woman was pregnant, you know, that gave me the truth bumps, because that sort of sister care is something that, you know, the world has, at least the Western world, the industrialized nations, have largely disconnected from, through no fault of our own. You know, it's just been everything that's rolled out, culture and all of it, that's sort of disconnected us from it. But there is like an ancient yearning, I think, in all women to re-access that and to experience that.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think that's a beautiful note for us to finish on today.
Yep.
And that element that it is possible, you know, your little vision of being able to create that in our communities. All right, let's say we are doing it.
Yes.
You know, it's already done because we are doing it. And that's the crux of it. You know, if I'm doing it, when I do it, it's already done.
Yes.
I remember that. I remember how powerful I am. And every single action is with intention, it's with responsibility, and it's with love and honor.
Yes.
That's the word of the day, honor.
Honor. I love it. I love it all, sister. And I love you.
I love you too. These conversations are awesome, aren't they?
They are. They're so much fun. They're so meaningful. All right. So
have a good sleep tonight. I'm going into my day.
You have a beautiful day. I'll try to, it's too late now, but I still owe you a picture of a sunset.
Oh yeah, you do. The North Node sunset. Bring it on.
I will. I love the South Node one.
Yeah, so good.
All right. Bye.
See ya.